الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. So he was speaking about, Ayatollah Jawadi was speaking about khawf and huzn. And so tonight, inshallah, we want to finish this topic. Last session, we kind of went to the side a little and spoke about one form of grief, or one of the origins of grief that these mystics have, that he didn't speak about in his book. Ayatollah Jawadi did not address in his book. So we talked about that a little bit. But now going back to the book, the last thing we want to talk about is he speaks about generally how there are different concepts out there, one of them being fear and grief, that depending on the object of that concept. So for example, fear and grief, what do you have fear of? What do you have grief of? Depending on what the object is, that fear, grief, or other concept that we'll have some examples for will be good or bad. So it's not like grief is something always good, or grief is something always bad. Happiness, joy, always good, always bad. No, it's not the case. It really depends on the object. And you'll find this a lot throughout our tradition. So for example, he'll give you an example of tama'. We have this in Arabic, tama'. Tama' means, and we also have this in Farsi, we might have it in Urdu too. Tama', do you have that? Yeah, so it means to, have an inclination towards something and want something, and yeah? Yeah, to be a little, it's kind of negative. It has negative connotations actually, and might border with on greed. But yeah, greed has its own word. So tama' just means something that you're very inclined towards, you might be obsessed with, you want to gain, something like that. So tama' sometimes is good, sometimes is bad, although this word has negative connotations and usually is used in the negative. But all in all, he says, well, we look at the object, the Quran, because this book is based on, this book of stages of Akhlaaq in the Quran is based on the Quran, he brings verses for that. So he says, for example, when you have tama' towards worldly things, it'll be bad. Tama'. And we will also we'll have other words for that. Shuh and bukhl, these kinds of things. These will be bad. So for example, the verse of the Quran, وَمَنْ يُوقَ شُحَّ نَفْسِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. Surah Al-Hashr, verse 9. That whosoever is protected from the greed of themselves, they are the ones who will have salvation. They will be delivered. They will have falah. Okay. What is shuh? Shuh means that greeds towards what? Towards something worldly. Okay, so the object of my tama' here is determining whether or not that tama' is good or bad. But at the same time, although, as I said, tama' has negative connotations, the word itself, and usually is used in a negative way, the Quran itself uses this term in a positive way as well. Surah Sajda, verse 16. يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ خَوْفًا وَطَمَعًا. Wow. It uses the same negative word for something positive, and then all of a sudden this whole thing becomes positive. Let me pull up the verse, the entire verse actually. Yeah, we have it used several times actually. خوفا وطمعا. Yeah, it's like used 4 times. That the people, some of the people who are special in the sense that it says تتجافى جنوبهم عن المضاجع. These people wake up for Salat al-Layl. These are some of those verses in Surah Sajda that are beautiful regarding those who do Salat al-Layl. That their sides get up from their resting places. تتجافى جنوبهم عن المضاجع. And as they're getting up, this is so beautiful. As they're getting up, يدعون ربهم خوفا وطمعا. And they're calling unto their Lord out of fear. So fear here is good. And out of tama'. Well, what are you looking forward to? What are you after? The same thing that the people in the A'raf, in Surah Al-A'raf, it talks about it. They are yatma'un. They have tama' for what's awaiting them in Jannah. They can't wait to get to it. So all of a sudden, because the object of my tama' is something good, then tama', although it's as I said, it's a negatively used verb usually, all of a sudden becomes something positive. So that's an example of one of these concepts. We'll get to some other ones as well. But what we were talking about was khawf and huzn, or fear and grief. It can be good, he says, it can be bad, based on the object of these. So, for example, he gives examples for the bad fear, the bad khawf, or the bad huzn. ألا إن أولياء الله لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. Khawf and huzn after you die, inshallah, if you are one of the awliyaullah, one of the people who had wilayatullah. In other words, for them, they didn't have wilayatul shaitan. They didn't have wilayatul other things. Okay? They had wilayatullah. In other words, they were after satisfaction of Allah in this life, making them awliyaullah. These people, once death comes, la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. They don't have khawf anymore, they don't have huzn anymore. Which khawf and huzn are we talking about? Any khawf or huzn that comes after death. Right? So if khawf and huzn is happening for us in this life, it can be good, it can be bad. But the one that comes after death, based on this verse, is not something good. Or else the Quran wouldn't say, awliyaullah will not have any khawf or any huzn after they die. Yeah? Now, based on the interpretation that this verse is speaking about after death. What else? What other kind of huzn do we have that's not good? لِكَيْ لَا تَأْسَوْا عَلَى مَا فَاتَكُمْ وَلَا تَفْرَحُوا بِمَا آتَاكُمْ. Allah says in the Quran that when you lose something, don't become too upset. Too upset as if you lost everything. Even your akhirah as if. No. So anything that has to do with this dunya even, losing it in this dunya, losing anything in this dunya, if that's the object of my huzn, that's the reason for my huzn, this huzn becomes, and this grief becomes something bad, something negative. Right? But then all of a sudden, this khawf, this huzn becomes good, based on the object again. For example, وَلِمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ جَنَّتَانِ. So for the person who has fear of the rank of his Lord, or her Lord, okay? The one who has khawf, and I'll talk about this towards the end of the talk, because people talk about how, we should not bolden the fear aspect of the religion, and I agree. We shouldn't bolden it in a certain way, but in other ways, the Quran itself is boldening it, okay? So people relax here with the whole, it's all about love and stuff, and no. There's fear as well, but we have to just know how to use it. Yes, we've overdone it. We have overdone it, and we haven't used this fear aspect in the right places. Like, I shouldn't be telling my 5-year-old kid that if they play with the markers and draw on the carpet that they're going to go to Jahannam. That's the wrong way of using fear, okay? The Quran, when it uses fear for something else, not for these things. But we tell our kids this all the time. That's not going to be, it's going to lose the effect it's supposed to have. Anyway, so examples of good fear, the first one, لِمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ جَنَّتَانِ. The one who has khawf of the maqam and the rank of their Lord gets 2 jannahs. Not 1 jannah, 2 jannahs. Alright? Or that's verse number Rahman, Surah Rahman, verse 46. Or أَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَىٰ. As for the one who has fear of the rank of his Lord. What is fear of the rank of the Lord? Meaning you understand the position the Lord has and you fear that. Okay? In other words, has fear of the Lord. The one who has fear of the Lord and as a result does what? نَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ. Forbids the nafs, forbids themselves of those impermissible desires that they have. فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَىٰ. As a result, Jannah is going to be their eternal abode. Okay? Within Jannah and paradise, this person will have Jannatan, 2 gardens, as if. So we're just bringing those 2 verses together. One of them said 2 Jannahs, one says Jannah is their abode. So someone might say that one said 2, this one says 1. Which one is it? No, Al-Jannah with a capital P, paradise. Within it, people have different things. Some people have 1 garden, some people might have 2 gardens. And a garden, not just some small place, right? No, I'm talking big stuff, okay? I'm talking big plots of land, all right? So those are 2 examples for good fear, khawf. Why? Because the object of the khawf is appropriate. But then you have also an example for good grief. Good grief. Good grief. Praiseworthy grief. What is that? ترى أعينهم تفيض من الدمع مما عرفوا من الحق. Surah Ma'idah, verse 83. It's talking about these verses are talking about the Nasara, the Christians of that time. Some of them were inclined towards the faith to the point where they would hear these verses, and so the Quran says, you know why they're inclined towards Islam, some of them? Because amongst them are qissisin wa ruhban, that there are monks among them, people who are detached from the dunya amongst them, scholars amongst them, okay? So these people, and of course if they're scholars, they know that there's a prophet coming, and when the verses of the Quran are recited to them, or when what has been revealed to you, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you recite it to them, you see what happens? Tara, you see a'yunahum tafidu min ad-dam', that their eyes are flowing with tears. Yes, overflowing with tears. Now, of course, there's a little eloquence in this verse that the Arabic has. It doesn't say their tears flow; it says their eyes flow. So it's just kind of maybe illustrating how much tears they have. It's not just like, oh, they're crying or weeping. It's like as if their eyes are coming out, kind of something like that. Why? Because of what they have now recognized as the truth. مِمَّا عَرَفُوا مِنَ الْحَقِّ. This is a grief. They're weeping out of grief, Ayatollah Jawadi says. Why? Because why is it till now we're not aware of this? And from here on we know of it. Yes, so this is a grief that they have. We wish we had known of this sooner, so that we could have benefited more from it. So these kinds of things, this is a grief. And it's in the dunya, it's not in the akhirah, it's not after death. It's in this life, but because the object of this grief is something good, then the grief is going to be good. So you won't really find total batil in this life, or total haqq in this life, something that is only batil. Lots of times, I haven't given this much thought, but I can say at least that lots of times, it will depend on other things. Dunya itself, love of mother and father and siblings and family and friends, all of these things are relative when it comes to them being good or bad in the books of Islam, right? Depends on why you love something, what you're after, these kinds of things, which, hey, makes life easier for us, right? To the point where you're walking to the bathroom and you have the right intention for it, that even can be considered ibadah, right? So it all goes back to these things. The object of the grief, the object of the fear, or the intention one has. But of course, at the same time, we don't let this cause any misunderstanding for us, thinking that, okay, from now on, all that matters is the intention. And all that matters is the object of these things. So for example, someone might be living a very extravagant life and be like, oh, I have the right intentions. Okay, like, no, that's not something that is encouraged Islamically. For you to go all out, not take care of anything else that you need to take care of, and say, I have the right intention. Or that you commit haram, you say, I don't have a bad intention. No, we can't justify things like that either, but you get the point. All right, so conclusion so far, the grief here that these people had was good because the grief was over something virtuous. Okay? And so here another word comes into our dictionary, and that's gham. Gham. Ayatollah Jawadi, he does a little bit of a linguistic discussion here. He says, okay, we've talked about huzn, grief, but there's another thing like huzn, it's called gham. And he talks about how gham comes from ghamam. Ghamam in Arabic, it refers to clouds. What do clouds do? Clouds cover. They don't let you see the sun or the sun to see you, right? And so he says, this grief, these clouds, just like we were talking about how grief can be good or bad, clouds are the same thing. Sometimes clouds get in the way of the sun, that's not good. Sometimes clouds are bringing rain with them. Okay? And so he takes it from there and he talks about how these things, these clouds that sometimes we feel are overtaking us, are actually good things because they will push us to gain something. Just like how rain, when it comes, of course it gets dark, but at the same time, the rain that comes down, of course, is a blessing. All right, so let's move on to some other examples here of things that can be good and bad. So you can tell he's going on a little bit of a tangent here, okay? So, for example, if we have good and bad grief and fear, that means the flip side also holds. We have good and bad happiness and joy as well. Something to keep in mind. Example of a bad joy. إِنَّهُ كَانَ فِي أَهْلِهِ مَسْرُورًا. We all know what surur means, right? Do you have surur? Like, are you happy right now? Or do you have it in Urdu? Surur, yes, happiness and joy. The Quran here is talking about some of these people who, either because of their kufr, because of their sin, because of their arrogance, they were very joyous and happy. إِنَّهُ كَانَ فِي أَهْلِهِ مَسْرُورًا. This person is talking about a person. This person, when he or she was amongst their relatives and family and their people, they were very happy and joyous. Oh, are you saying that it's bad to be joyous and happy? No, no one's saying that. This is Surah Inshiqaq, verse 13, by the way. إِنَّهُ كَانَ فِي أَهْلِهِ مَسْرُورًا. But Ayatollah Jawadi, what he says here is that, look, if a happiness is going to be a false happiness, a fake happiness, fake in the sense of, no, you're really happy, but fake in the dictionary of God, okay? Then that happiness that is fake will have a real grief coming with it, and that grief will show itself in this life or the hereafter, or both. For example, if a person assumes a position they're not entitled to, they're not deserving of, okay, and they're in charge of certain things when we're not supposed to be sitting in that position. Well, the gham of this dunya or the huzn of this dunya for them is people eventually find out, and this person is exposed and humiliated and has to leave that position. But even worse than that, in the akhirah, another huzn comes, and that's the huzn of adab and other things. So this is an example of bad surur. Why? Because of the object of the surur. Why was this person happy? But no one, denies the fact that happiness and joy is something good, actually. We have, God knows how many hadith we have for this. إِدْخَالُ السُّرُورِ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِ. How mustahab it is to bring about happiness and joy into the heart of a believer. Yeah, have you noticed I'm usually joking around and stuff? It's because I want to make you happy so I get sawab, right? That's my justification. But idkhal surur, yeah, we have this in our literature. Once again, so surur is good. In these cases it's good, but in that case it's bad. So let's talk about other surur now, other happiness that is now good because of the object of that surur, because of the reason for that surur. He gives the example of Surah Rum, verse 4. The good surur can be because of dunya matters, things that happen in the dunya, and some of the surur and farah happens in the akhirah. Okay, so both are possible. Good surur and farah. Farah means happiness. They can happen here and they can happen there, and they can be good. For example, لله الأمر من قبل ومن بعد ويومئذ يفرح المؤمنون. Does anyone know which verse this is? Which one is talking about? Let me translate it. That everything is in Allah's hands. Okay? لله الأمر. The affair belongs to Allah. Allah makes the final decision. Before and after. And on that day the mu'minun will be happy. Do you know which one is talking about here? Which story it's talking about? Surah Rum. What is it talking about? Does anyone know? Surah Rum, in the beginning of it, where the prediction is made that the Romans will defeat the Persians in a few years. في بضع سنين, in a few years. Now, the Quran says on that day, when the Romans defeat the Persians, the mu'minun are going to be happy. The believers, the Muslims are going to be happy. Why? Because back then, the Romans, the Byzantines, they were muwahideen at the end of the day. They were monotheists, right? The Persians, on the other hand, they were not. They were pagans, right? And so there was a war in which these muwahideen, although they're people of the book, the Christians, but they, at the end of the day, they're muwahideen. They lost to the Persians. And so some of these pagans apparently were happy about that and rejoicing over that, because they're like, look, they believe in one God too, but you see they got defeated. The Quran says, don't worry, in a few years they're going to defeat them. The Romans will defeat the Persians, and that's what happened. It's a famous story and verse, and they usually use this verse to say, oh, look, see, the Quran is a miracle because it's foretelling the future. All right, anyway, what word is used here? يَفْرَحُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. For something that has to do with this dunya, that's happening in this dunya, and that is the victory of the Christians over the pagans, right? It's a dunyawi thing. It has to do with the minor struggle, al-jihad al-asghar. And so, still, it's a positive thing. It's a good farah. We have the akhirah as well. فَوَقَاهُمُ اللَّهُ شَرَّ ذَلِكَ الْيَوْمِ وَلَقَّاهُمْ نَضْرَةً وَسُرُورًا. On the day of judgment, also, there's going to be farah. Surah Insan, verse 11. It says that Allah protected them from the shar and evil of that day. The day of judgment, yeah, it will come with evil for those who deserve it. Okay? I don't know if we can term it as evil, but it's going to be bad for some people for sure. It carries with it some bad, but Allah protects the believers from the bad of that day. فَوَقَاهُمُ اللَّهُ شَرَّ ذَلِكَ الْيَوْمِ. What else does He do, Allah, in addition to protecting? لَقَّاهُمْ نَضْرَةً وَسُرُورًا. Bestows upon them nadra. Nadra with a dad means freshness. Okay? وَسُرُورًا. And happiness and joy. Okay, so this is good. This is good. So look at that. Huzn. Huzn. And I want to say this. Huzn and khawf. These are two things that can be good and bad in this dunya. But in the akhirah, what are they? Only bad. There's no room for khawf and huzn anymore. And the Quran says, أَوْلِيَاءُ لَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. The flip side, farah and surur. Farah and surur in this dunya can be good, can be bad. But after death and on the day of judgment, farah and surur is always good. And on that day, only the mu'mineen are going to have farah and surur. And the ones who, the enemies of God, what do they have? All they have is khawf and huzn. You see? Alright. Some other examples now of things that can be good or bad. Raja, hope. So usually hope, unlike tama had negative connotations. Hope usually has positive connotations, right? And it's always, life only matters with hope, and without hope, life, makes no sense and doesn't have meaning, etc. Right? That's what they'll say. But no, having hope in other than Allah is something seen as bad in the Islamic dictionary, so to speak. So, لا يرجون أحد منكم إلا ربه, Imam Ali says in Nahj al-Balagha, that don't any of you dare to have hope in anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is saying number 82 of Nahj al-Balagha. La yarjuwanna. Yarjuwanna comes from raja, hope. Alright? Now, this is deeper tawheed. I don't have to explain this, right? We have spoken about this before. It doesn't mean that the moment you have hope in someone helping you or, taking your hand and so on, that that's a problem. No, it just shows that we still have some work to do so that we understand that, okay, Allah's behind everything in the end. Yeah. But all in all, when you look at it from that lens, it is something negative To have hope in other than Allah. Or for example, the hadiths tell us the ones who have hope in what others have in their hands, what the others possess. Okay? Don't put your hope there. Al-ya'su mimma fi aydin nas. You should be hopeless of what others have in their possession. Oh, but I might be able to get my hands on it. Okay, but how do you know that that's going to eventually solve your problem if Allah doesn't want it? Yes, you do your part, but look, it's all about perspective. Have the right perspective. Don't ever feel like that's going to save me. Allah's going to save you through that. Yes, so those are examples for bad. And of course, that example also had the good side of it. لا يرجون أحد منكم إلا ربه means that, okay, the good raja and hope is the one that's put in the Lord. The bad khawf, the bad raja is what is put into other than the Lord. So another examples for the good ones. He says, يرجون تجارة لن تبور. There are some who, because they are believers, they have righteous deeds. يرجون تجارة لن تبور. They have hope in a trade, in a deal that of course they're making with Allah, right? Tijarat. Tijaratan, that will never end or will never bring about loss, if I'm translating it correctly. So to have hope in a deal that you're making with God is a good hope. Okay? But what kind of deal is worth giving it hope? The deal that you will know never will yield loss for you. And that is only when you deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's very awesome because, once again, we have to understand that it's okay to have hope in these things, these tijarat. The only thing that we have to be after is one that will not cease to exist, one that will not yield loss. That's the important part. Okay, I've talked about this before. How Imam Ali, he doesn't have a problem with pleasure. What does he have a problem with? He has a problem with pleasure and blessings and ni'mah that ends. He doesn't like that part. مَا لَعَلِيًّا وَنَعِيمًا يَفْنَى or تَفْنَى وَلَا يَبْقَى. Imam Ali, he says in Nahj al-Balagha, I have nothing to do with blessings that end. Oh, so I thought you had problems with blessings. I thought you had problems with, he says, وَلَذَّةٍ لَا تَبْقَى نَعِيمًا يَفْنَى وَلَذَّةٍ لَا تَبْقَى, something like that, which means blessings that cease to exist and pleasures that don't persist. Okay, so that's the qualifier right there. That's important. He doesn't have a problem with pleasure. He's like, I'm gonna shoot for the pleasure that never ends. Okay? That's gonna happen in Jannah. So I want to strike a deal with God, but a deal that's gonna never yield loss. So it's okay to be interested in deals and business and all of that, right? But be after the one that never yields loss, is always gonna be there for you. Have hope in that. Yarjuna tijaratan lan tabur. What else do we have of examples for good raja? فَمَنْ كَانَ يرجو لقاء ربه فليعمل عملا صالحا ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا. So whoever has yarju, raja, hope of liqa rabbihi, to meet their Lord, that's something good. Of course, what do they have to do? فليعمل عملا صالحا. They should do righteous deeds. ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا. And do not ascribe any partners to Allah when it comes to the worship of God, which inshallah we don't do. So we just have to add more and more to our portfolio of good deeds. Yeah. And I think we have other verses that scold the ones who don't have hope in reaching God. They're not looking forward to seeing God and meeting God. لا يرجون لقاءنا. So the flip side of it has also been mentioned. That's how good it is. That's how important it is. Okay, so that's an example for that. Even our inclinations, our hubb, our love of things. Love is good, love can be bad. Examples, تأكلون التراث أكلا لما وتحبون المال حبا جما. You go all out when it comes to devouring whatever inheritance has reached you, whatever wealth has reached you through inheritance. تأكلون التراث أكلا لما وتحبون المال. You love wealth. Yeah. A lot. So that's loving something can be bad, but then at the same time, يُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. At the same time, there's a good type of love or inclination or giving preference to things. يُؤْثِرُونَ. They give preference over themselves to others. Even if they have poverty themselves, it says وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. Wow. All right, so there are some people that are like that. I don't know who they are. That they're struggling themselves, but still, while keeping a balance, still they're benefiting others as well. That's awesome. All right. And finally, so those, we're done with khawf and raja and stuff, and other examples of things that can be good and bad. But I want to explain one thing here. Going back to what I said towards the beginning, about how we have overdone this khawf thing, or have we not overdone it? Do we overuse it? Do we misuse it? At the end of the day, one of the stages of akhlaaq, according to this, was what? Khawf and huzn. Fear and grief. Straight up. Okay? We have to understand that. We have to acknowledge that. Why is this the case? It seems, this is what I can think of, that it is so important because without it, we don't get off of our backs. Allah knows what He's created. Okay? I'll give you a very dumb example. Yeah? The dad might tell his kids to get good grades in school and that I'll reward you with this, that, and that. Sometimes, if not a lot of times, that's not going to be enough to get the kid off their back. But when the dad shows him the belt, of course in this day and age you can't do that. Okay? But back in our day you could do that. Well, even my dad never did that to us, alhamdulillah. But the way he just looked at you was enough, You know what you got to do. Right? That's the best skill, to strike, I'm speaking, a little loosely here, but like strike fear into your kids without even ever have to hit them once in your life, That they will take you serious, although they know you'll never even hurt them. Yeah. Anyway, let's go back to the example. The dad, if he shows the belt, you don't need no incentives anymore to study, right? Forget about, this is going to be your prize, that's going to be this, that, Chuck E. Cheese, all that. No. The incentive, forget about it. Who cares about it? I don't want to get hit by the belt. We're talking about 100 years ago. That's how they would do it. All right. Same thing here, brothers and sisters. Khawf is one of those stages of akhlaaq. It might be one of the first ones, at least this form of it. But it is one of these stages of akhlaaq. We will not get off of our backs. You know what we'll do? We'll come up with excuses. Allah says in the Quran, do this, do that. We know no adhab is there. No punishment is there. You know what we're going to do? We say, I might get bored in Jannah. So I don't need to, I'm not going to do this. Right? Or I'm good here. I don't need anything there. I'll just stick to the now. Allah knows that a lot of us won't get off our backs and we're going to miss out. We're going to regret it on the Day of Judgment. Oh Allah, you should have really pushed me to do what look at what's going on. Look what I'm missing out on. All right, this is one way of looking at it. I want to say, it's one of the stages of akhlaaq because it gets you off your back. If you know that it's punishment awaiting you, then you will get off your back. But if you're like, oh, Jannah, eternity and infinity, still won't cut it for you. That's just the kind of creatures we are. We stick to the now. We care about the now. We don't care how good the later is. Correct? And so it is one of the stages of akhlaaq. So I don't like how some people try to make it all about love. Okay? It is love. As a matter of fact, the verse of the Quran that says, كَتَبَ عَلَى نَفْسِهَا الرَّحْمَةِ, Allah has made rahmah incumbent upon him. Even the adhab is rahmah. The verse never said, كَتَبَ عَلَى نَفْسِهَا الرَّحْمَةِ وَالْغَضَبِ, that Allah wrote upon Himself, made incumbent upon Himself mercy and wrath. It doesn't say that. The only thing Allah has made incumbent upon Himself according to that verse is what? Rahmah, mercy. You know what that means? That means everything Allah does is rahmah. Even the adhab is rahmah. Alright? Now I'll let the urafa talk about how that is. Okay? But even that is rahmah. Alright, so if that's the case, definitely khawf is not to be undermined. Khawf of what? Khawf of punishment, which is the lowest khawf. We said khawf has different origins, right? The lowest one, let's say, is khawf from adhab, okay? And of punishment. That's awesome. That's why, like, all of these verses of the Quran are striking fear into our hearts, because God knows the moment He eases off on us, we're going to ease off of everything else, right? Yes, it's not a place to get stuck on for your entire life, right? I can't be 50, 60, 70 years old and still have khawf in the way a 12-year-old or 15-year-old or 20-year-old is going to have. Inshallah, I've grown enough to move beyond that. And that's where this whole idea of, you've probably heard me talk about this before. I'm saying it for the record for this class and the recordings. This hadith, the famous hadith of 3 types of ibadah. Yes, what is one of them? Those who worship God out of fear. And then they say this is the worst one. And then the ones who do it out of love for Jannah or looking forward to Jannah. And then the ones who do it out of love of God. And that's the best one. All right, brothers and sisters, like, does this mean that now, like, from this day forward, we can just worship God out of love? No, love happens over a period of time and as a result of me being an obedient servant of Allah. So I have to move in that direction. What are the steps to get there? Well, it starts with khawf from adab. That's what the Quran is doing. And then slowly it makes its way towards love of Jannah, because you're like, okay, inshallah, because of Allah's mercy, we're set. And we don't have to worry too much about the adab. Now it's time to look forward to Jannah. And then, because the Quran says that. And then after that, it reaches a point where, like, forget Jannah, forget Nar, forget all of that. Allah Himself, love of Allah. That's for the awliyaullah, that's for the urafa. But so we can't undermine that part. The khawf part is there. It's the first step and stage of everything. So while I agree that we are not using the khawf in the right way for sure, and we're overdoing it, it doesn't mean now that we're going to put it aside either. No, it's part of the deal. Because it all will go back to us getting off our backs because we don't want a harm to come our way. This in Arabic is called daf'ul darar. Alright, the death of Zara. Okay? Daf means to repel something, keep something away from you. Darar means harm. As a matter of fact, daf of darar that's muhtamal, that's possible. We're not 100% sure, but even if there's a possibility a harm is going to come my way, I will do something, right, to keep that away from me. Right? If they tell me, if someone runs in here right now, some 15-year-old kid runs in here and says, there's a guy outside with a gun. Are we all going to just continue sitting here? We're going to all probably go, find a place to hide, right? There's a chance this kid is kidding. There's a chance this kid is wrong. This guy delusional, whatever. There's a possibility. It's enough for me to run. Daf'u darar al-muhtamal is necessary, let alone daf'u darar al-qat'i, a darar and harm that is for sure. If you don't believe that there is a day of judgment, if you don't believe that there is a Jahannam and Jannah, then we have an issue here. We have a problem because these are usul ad-din, right? So we know it's coming, right? Allah is going to use that to get us off of our backs because He knows what He's created. And then, of course, you will grow out of this, inshallah. We grow out of this. And then it reaches the point, even if we do have fear of Jahannam even, it's not that we fear Allah and because He's going to take us to Jahannam. What do we actually fear? We fear our own a'mal. Because our a'mal here, their embodiment there will be the fire. As a matter of fact, Allah is just letting us know, hey, I've put you here, and this is how the world works. What you do here, that translates to something like this over there. Have respect for yourselves. Yeah. But if you do good, it'll multiply by 10 times and all the good stuff that comes with it. So yes, this is one of those important stages, I would say. It's not good to stay fixated on it forever. But for sure, whenever you feel like you're slacking off, it's a good place to fall back on. I'll end with this, the famous saying by Imam Ali that, look, if you're feeling it, go and do extra mustahabbat and all that. When you're not feeling it, fall back on the wajib and haram. Why? Because that goes back to the khawf and fear of, if I don't take care of that at least, then the adab, there's a good chance that the adab is going to come my way. And that is not something I am interested in. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Any questions? Yes.
When it comes to this path of spirituality, the spiritual journey, is everyone born with the same potential? Because sometimes it seems like the examples you give of the greats and whatnot, how far they've accelerated, they might have more potential or born in a different manner than others.
There's a lot to say about that. He's asking, if some people have more potential in this path of spirituality versus others. I would say, personally, based on what I've heard here and there, is that there might be some difference in potential. But then in the end, it's how much of that potential did you actualize, right? One person will have potential to reach 1,000. If they go 100 steps, that's 10%. Another person has potential for 100 steps. They go 10, they go 15. They've done 15% progress. Really, the measuring stick is with Allah in the end. You know, some will say that even the family you're born into, the lineage that you have has an effect on how much of a potential you have. But in the end, look, it might sound unfair sometimes. And look, we have to fall back on what we're sure about. And what's sure is that I have a certain potential, and I have to try my best to actualize that, whatever it is. I don't even know how much that potential is. I guess that's part of the deal, you know? And I guess the sky is the limit in the end. I mean, look at the Prophet's time. Some of the best companions of the Prophet, what were they before they became Muslim? They were idol worshippers and adulterers, you know? Not that someone could say, oh, but there was no Islam back then, so they were off the hook. No, these are things that you know are haram anyway. You don't have to have Islam for some of these things, you know? Or idol worship. Idol worship is something that everyone knows is wrong anyway. The only reason you're doing it is because your forefathers. So these people became the greatest of some of the companions of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So yeah, there's different things that can be said in that regard, but all in all, I think the best thing to do is just to worry about ourselves, and how much potential, whatever it is we have, that we inshallah actualize. Okay, walhamdulillah rabbil alameen, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, salawat ala Muhammad wa Muhammad.